Anime has a bit of a reputation for being weird, especially to the uninitiated or people outside of Japan who don't understand the nature of the medium. But as one dives deeper and deeper into watching and learning about anime, they will come to find that much of it is weird in the same way. Much of what anime is shaped by the culture surrounding it and the culture of anime itself, building on things which have come before, and really following a pretty natural through line over the course of its history. Anime is not exactly quick to innovate. In an average year, you will probably see dozens of anime series come out which bear a strong resemblance to the exact same things that were airing 15 years ago, only with adherence to new trends, new animation techniques, and better technology. So as a diehard anime fan, it can be easy to eventually become jaded towards the weirdness of anime, and in fact to view much of it as kind of stagnant and boring and not weird enough. But there have always been a handful of creative staff in the anime industry who seem determined to keep anime weird and innovative, to push it in new directions and do things that nobody else is really doing. When the utterly strange Neon Genesis Evangelion blew up in 1995, it really opened up the doors for TV anime to get a lot more experimental and strange. And in the years immediately following Evangelion, we saw a surge of much more innovative and interesting shows coming out, many of which were interesting in a lot of the same ways as Evangelion. But one anime screenwriter who really emerged onto the scene in this period was Chiaki J. Konaka, a man who seemingly made it his mission to make anime as weird and different as humanly possible. A man who started putting a J in the middle of his name just for stylistic reasons to make it look cool when he was 12 and directing his own homemade videos, Chiaki Konaka got his start in TV writing for live-action TV series, most especially many of the series of Ultraman which came out throughout the 90s. His younger brother, Kazuya Konaka, was also a director working in TV, and the two of them even worked together on several projects. But Chiaki would make his debut in anime with the 4-episode OVA Armitage III, a sci-fi cyberpunk series about androids with emotions fighting on Mars, with lots of slick and badass action scenes and some cool character designs. But compared to anything else which this writer would tackle in anime, a fairly pedestrian plot, one that follows a very clear Hollywood-esque arc. While it does feature some potentially interesting themes regarding technology, it's nothing you won't have seen before if you're a fan of sci-fi and especially cyberpunk. Konaka would continue to pop his head into anime over the course of the next few years, writing episodes of Magic Users Club and Vampire Princess Miu, but where his infamy truly began was when he wrote for Serial Experiments Lain, a series which baffled and boggled the minds of many viewers, causing them to re-watch the show over and over again trying to fully understand it, with a very common sentiment expressed towards the show being that it takes 4 full viewings to completely get everything that's going on. The story of Lain focuses largely on technology, particularly the internet, which was just starting to become kind of a big deal in 1998, but in the context of this story already encompasses society and much more closely resembles what the internet would be like 10 or even 20 years later. It's safe to say that Lain was way the hell ahead of its time, and it's easy to see that Konaka had worked in elements from all sorts of essays or predictions about the future of the internet that he had been reading at the time, and that he had a very firm grasp on what the internet was at a time when very few people had such a thing. Lain puts a lot of emphasis on the idea that people are always connected, that the internet would bring everyone together, that friends who you have online would eventually be no different from friends who you had in reality. Keep in mind, this is not something that was commonly thought of until a good 10 years later. The series posits philosophical ideas about what it means to have yourself inside of the computer, and what it would mean to leave behind your physical form and to exist as the entity which is contained within the data on the cloud. It explores themes both psychological and philosophical about what the internet will bring into the lives of everyone on Earth. And it even has a lot of strong predictions about things like Anonymous, which has a very clear parallel in this story in spite of the fact that it didn't even exist yet in 1998. But far from being a sci-fi info dump, the series is hardly direct about any of its messages, favoring an extremely atmospheric presentation, taking lots of cues from Konaka's history as someone who wrote stories in the Cthulhu mythos. In spite of being a mere 13 episodes and relatively sparse with dialogue, Serial Experiments Lain is packed to the gills with themes and intrigue. It's the kind of show you can make a whole series of videos just analyzing, which I did a while ago. and lots of other people have done as well. Serial Experiments Lain is the kind of series which only Chiaki Konaka could have written. For better or for worse, lots of people find it confusing and mind-numbing and just don't get it or are bored and don't know why the hell they should care, and that's all perfectly understandable. Lain was a cult favorite for a very long time, partly for having been, again, so ahead of its time and so distinctive, and also for having such a lovable and memorable main character and such fantastic artwork. Not all of Konaka's series would be remembered quite so fondly. Not everything that Konaka worked on was equally out there, though. He did write for Bubblegum Crisis Tokyo 2040, Devilman Lady, Magic Users Club the TV series, and then he wrote a season of Digimon. You know, Digimon, a kids show, into which he very infamously injected lots of very dark and Lovecraftian elements. Digimon Tamers is famous for its weird episodes, and you can thank Konaka entirely for making that kind of thing a part of the series. After all, this is the same guy who was writing Hellsing in the very same year. Not exactly someone you'd imagine working on kids shows, but hey, there he is. It certainly isn't a surprise to see him turning up on 4 episodes of Razafon, a series which seemed aimed to answer Evangelion with an even more esoteric and experimental 26-episode mecha series. But if he had another breakout success, it would be as the writer of The Big O. Now, The Big O is mostly beloved for being a Batman meets mecha series, one with a suave main character, a very slick style, beautiful animation and design work, and a mystery plot which gradually unfolds over the course of its first season, after which it was summarily cancelled. But then Toonami decided to fund a second season of it, and I guess they let Konaka do whatever the hell he wanted. So the second season got fucking weird and deeply confusing. Not unlike Lain, The Big O pays homage to lots of Konaka's influences. There are direct references to the film Metropolis, for example, and many other citations to classic film noir. But when the series gets existential, it does so in a way that maybe doesn't explain itself all that well, and lots of viewers just found themselves kind of confused about what the hell was going on in their what they thought was just a fun Batman mecha show. But if you really want to see Konaka put the cult in cult hit, you need to look at Technolize, his 2003 series which takes the abstraction to a whole new level. Technolize is brutal. It is painful to watch. I wrote a video about the crushing, nihilistic agony of merely taking the series in. It is darker than black. And darker than black by a long shot. Infamously, the first episode goes 14 minutes before anyone even fucking speaks. And what the series embarks on is an incredibly brutal, difficult journey through an underground city which is ravaged by gang violence. Characters grappling with finding any meaning in their lives. And later into the story, a reveal of a grander second nature to the cyberpunk world that this is all set in, which really brings new questions about humanity that I don't even want to spoil. But suffice it to say, if you watch this series all the way through, you will be left with a searing hole in your chest where emptiness only resides. In the meantime, when Konaka wasn't working on original projects, he was doing adaptations, and of course they'd always put him on the darkest shit imaginable. Hellsing aside, he would also go on to write Shadowstar Narutaru, which is infamous for the fact that it looks like Digimon, but is actually incredibly dark and violent. Konaka was also responsible for a few of the strangest episodes of Princess Tutu. Basically, when it came time for the series to explore its crazy meta-contextual plot, they brought this guy in to do the job for them, and he does a fantastic job with some of the most interesting pieces of the Princess Tutu plot. Konaka would then write a couple episodes of Eureka 7, as well as 2 major arcs of Mononoke, a series which is famous not so much for the trippiness of its writing, but the experimental nature of its visuals, it being a Japanese horror anthology series, each arc containing its own very distinct look and feel, with some interesting little stories that are directed impeccably. I highly recommend this series if you haven't checked it out already. But if there's a more proper follow-up to Technolize and Serial Experiments Lain, it would be his 2007 series Ghost Hound. This one was a longer series made with Production IG, which focuses heavily on auditory hallucinations, as well as things like sleep paralysis and lucid dreaming. It follows a kind of confusing mystery plot with some kind of not that likable characters, which didn't really draw a lot of viewers in. This is probably the least cult favorite of the 3 major Chiaki Konaka shows, considering that I don't really know anyone who would call call this one of their favorites. But nonetheless, it is once again a very out there, experimental piece of animation, and one which clearly plays strictly to Chiaki Konaka's interests. You can really tell that this is a show about things which he has researched and done a lot of experimentation in himself, hence the desire to bring all of it to the table. But unfortunately, Konaka has all but blinked off the map in the time since Ghost Hound. He was supposed to team up once again with Serial Experiments Lane director and character designers Ryutaro Nakamura and Yoshitoshi Abe respectively for a new series known as Despera, but as of Nakamura's unfortunate death, the series has been put into perpetual limbo. Rumors have come up here and there that it was going to be resurrected, but nothing has come out of it for the last few years. While Konaka had been consistently working on live-action TV and movies over the course of his career in anime, he straight up hasn't written anything for TV in the last 10 years. According to Japanese Wikipedia, though, he has been writing some books, including an essay on Babymetal, which I would desperately love to read. Please, dear God, anyone, if you can translate this book, please translate this book. It's 368 pages. He wrote 368 pages about Babymetal. Going by the translations of the reviews on Amazon, it seems like he may have also kept a blog about Babymetal for a while. I am fascinated with Konaka's fascination with Babymetal. Personally, even though I've had somewhat of a love-hate relationship with some of Chiaki J. Konaka's work, I would really love to see him make a return to anime, given that everything he's ever written has been so incredibly distinctive, and really feels like nothing else in the medium except for the other works that he wrote. Chiaki Konaka strikes me as a man who is interested in interesting things, and the way that he incorporates those interesting things into a narrative is itself interesting. Not all of his work is the most coherent, not all of it is the most easily penetrable, but all of the work from him that I've studied has revealed more and more intrigue the longer I've thought about it. Over the course of watching Lane and Technolize several times, I felt like I got a lot more out of them from seeing them a second time. These aren't merely consumable pieces of entertainment that are meant to flitter by over the course of a season to keep your attention and help you relax after work. They're pieces of art which are meant to be thought about and studied and pored over the course of years. Works that are meant to influence the way you think, to sit in the back of your mind and keep reminding you of these interesting ideas and the interesting ways that those ideas could be presented. It's easy enough to point out the fact that his work is weird, that it feels so incredibly different, and that may be worth the price of admission alone for some people. But it's not just the fact that it's weird, but that it's weird in a good way. It's weird in a way that I want more anime to be weird. And I'm really happy that for at least one decade, Chiaki Konaka kept breaking the mold and doing something completely different from what anyone else was doing. And I really hope that more anime writers like him will continue to emerge in the future, and that the ones who are still active will continue to be active. I hope you enjoyed this series and that you will check out literally anything that he's made that I mentioned that you haven't seen. All of it's worth looking at, even if you don't necessarily fall in love with it. I have a lot of problems with Big O and Ghost Hound, but I still think they're fascinating shows that I'm glad I got the chance to see. Stick around on my channel for more videos like this, and support me on Patreon if you want to help me to make those videos. Check out this playlist of every video that I'm in on YouTube because I'm on a lot of different channels. And as always, thanks again for watching. I'll see you in the next one.